All right, let's turn to the other side of the argument. This is the position that argues the fairness doctrine is not a good piece of regulation. In fact, it might be an unfair piece of legislation, and also they will argue that the things that lead to people to advocate the fairness doctrine in the first place are not real concerns, or they're concerns that can be handled otherwise. Now, same thing, we start to identify the parties and how this side will speak about the appropriate ethical and other status of the parties who are involved. If we're opposed to the fairness doctrine, that is to say we think that there should not be any sort of government control or shaping or shifting allocation of resources, that is to say a free market with respect to this resource use, then what will be emphasized by those who are in favor of that will be that with respect to the broadcasters, that the broadcasters have certain rights. And one of the important rights will be the right to property. I'll say, for example, if I own a radio station, I own the building, I own the transmitting equipment, I own the business, I own the real estate, and I've also purchased the license. And so all of these things are my personal property. And what goes along with a right to property is to be able to use that property however you wish. So in this case here, the point can also be generalized. I own a radio station. Then I can say on my radio station whatever I wish, just as if I own a newspaper press, I can print a newspaper and put in the newspaper whatever I wish. If I am a book publisher, I can publish books and put in those books whatever I wish. If I own a piece of property, I can stand on my front yard and announce my political opinions to whomever I want to, who happens to be passing by. The point is, if it's my property, then I should be able to use my property as I see fit. There's also an argument that is sometimes made that there is a right to liberty at issue here. More specifically, there is a free speech issue, and the First Amendment respects the right to the freedom of the press, and telecommunications and radio in particular are a form of publishing, press publishing. And so the argument is that First Amendment protection against government interference should also be applied here. Now, the more specific argument is to say if we have something like the fairness doctrine, I have granted an hour's airtime to a political candidate if I'm the broadcaster with whom I agree, and I deny access to an hour's radio time by someone with whom I disagree. If the government comes in and says I have to give an hour's radio time to the person with whom I disagree, well, I am not free during that hour to say what I want on my radio station. And so my liberty right or my free speech right is being abridged for that particular hour. And this side will also emphasize that I have a profit motive, that I want to earn money. And that's going to be a motivation that is seen fine as healthy, but it's also going to be one that is, leads to a win-win result from this side's perspective in terms of its relationship to the audience. So let's turn to the audience, having highlighted these rights for the broadcasters. On the audience side, this side will emphasize differently the strengths and weaknesses of the people who listen to the radio. While this side emphasizes the weakness of the listening audience, this side is going to emphasize the strengths of the listening audience. And one of the strengths that they will mention is that people don't have to listen to the radio. I have the power as an individual to turn the radio on or to turn the radio off. Nobody can make me do that. If I turn the radio on, I also can, if I don't like what I'm hearing, I can change the dial. Another side will argue in a monopoly situation, you don't really have that power. But if there's more than one radio station, then I can turn to another channel. Or of course, I can just turn the radio off and read a newspaper or a book or something like that. So I also, this side will argue, have a certain amount of intellectual strength, even if it is a monopoly and I only have one radio station available and I choose to listen to it. This side will disagree with the issue of being shaped and manipulated. I, as a human being, am in control of my own mind. People can think for themselves. Even if they only hear one side of an argument, they can agree or disagree, or it's not a huge intellectual leap for people to know that on almost any political issue there is controversy about it, and I have the power to recognize, oh, I'm only hearing one side of an argument, I should make an extra effort to go and listen to the other side of the argument. So people can control, right, what they listen to and what they don't listen to. They can control the content of their own mind. They are not weak, passive individuals whose minds are shaped by powerful broadcasting influences and so on. All right, some people will, of course, let themselves be shaped and manipulated, but this side is just arguing that people are not in, or should not be treated in that position. They also will emphasize, I'm going to leave a little bit of space here, the importance of treating people as self-responsible adults, particularly in the context of a democracy. That what makes democracy work is not, from this side's perspective, people being spoon-fed information, right, or having a paternalistic government making sure that the information gets to them and that they sort through the information appropriately and so forth. That part of my responsibility, right, as a human being and particularly as a citizen is, and particularly in election years, is to know that I need to get myself informed about those political issues so that I can make an informed, responsible vote. And that's a responsibility that lies with me. No one has an obligation to provide me with the information. Some people might choose to give me information and make their viewpoints known to me, but rather my self-responsibility is to be an active-minded person. If I'm not getting what I need from the radio, then I should go and read newspapers. I should go to political rallies. I should talk with my neighbors and family members and so forth to get myself informed. So I can't just lay back and say, well, nobody told me what all the positions are, therefore I'm off the hook responsibly. Instead, we should treat people as self-responsible agents, and they do have the intellectual strength in order to be able to do so. The other point that this side will mention has to do with economic power. As we've mentioned, typically people do not pay directly for radio access. There are pay radio options out there, but that's a minority contender. And this side then emphasizes the passivity, saying that they don't therefore have any impact on the content, right, of what is broadcast. And this side will say that, strictly speaking, is not true, that these people do have a significant amount of power that feeds into the profit motive calculations of the broadcasters, and that has to do with the somewhat unique business model of broadcasting. That is to say, advertisers are the ones who pay the bulk of the costs. So we think of it this way. If we go back to the broadcasters for a moment, suppose I want to make money, right, with my radio station. It's my business, it's my livelihood. I would like to be very profitable. How do I make big money in radio? Well, the way I make money in radio is get lots of advertisers who want to buy advertising time and to be able to charge a lot of money for that advertising time. So then the question is, how do I get lots of advertisers wanting to pay lots of money to me to have advertising time on my radio? And the only way I can do that is by having lots and lots of people in the audience who listen to my radio station, so that I can document, here's how many people I have listening at various times, and so then I can charge a certain market price for radio advertising during those particular times. And so then the question is, well, how do I get lots and lots of people to listen to my radio station? And the argument is the only way I can get lots and lots of people to listen to my radio station is to give them programming that they like. So I have to give them the news that they want, the sports information that they like, the weather information, the political information, right, and so forth. In some way, I have to be very attentive to what the people who listen to the radio want to hear and deliver that. To the extent that I do that, they will listen to me. I can then document to the advertisers, and the advertisers will give me lots and lots of money. So this side of the argument then will say, what comes out of this in a free market is a win-win, right, set of transactions. I, as a broadcaster, deliver content. I get my views out there, and hopefully I get money, right, coming from advertisers for doing so. But then at the same time, people in the listening audience are getting programming that they want. right? Advertisers are also getting their message out. And so these guys give up a certain amount of time in order to hear certain content. They judge that it to be useful to them. Advertisers pay money for advertising time. They judge that to be useful to them. And I run the business in a way that I think is profitable to me. That's a win for me. So this side will say, far from being a predation, right, scenario, what we get is a network of win-win-win transactions. Now that's not to say that every time the audience turns the radio on, they're going to be hearing exactly what they like. Lots of stuff, we don't like the music or we don't like the views that are being announced on the radio, but it's a cumulative judgment call. Overall, my radio listening time is a benefit to me, and I voluntarily judge and judge that it is so, and so I commit my time voluntarily to listening to it and so forth. All right, now this is not yet to speak about the competitors. One of the complaints comes from competitors that we have strong versus weak, and so we need to make room down here for the competition. What do we say from this side's perspective about the parties that are relatively advantaged or not with respect to this asset? All right, so with respect to competition, the key concepts that this side will emphasize are, again, the key concepts of self-responsibility, what it is to be a self-responsible competitor, and free choice, right, or voluntary participation. So we take the example of the political campaign. The point here will be, I don't have to run for political office. You don't have to run for political office. That if we choose to run for political office, to enter into that particular competition, we should make that choice for ourselves, and we should do so in an informed, self-responsible way. If I don't like my odds, and winning is really important to me, then I should go choose to enter into some sort of other competition. If I am going to compete, I should go into knowing it that other people are going to have various strengths and weaknesses. I'm going to have various strengths and weaknesses. And it's not appropriate for me to say that it's in some sense unfair that some people have advantages that I don't have. Instead, if I'm going to be a good, self-responsible competitor, I recognize that other people have advantages. Either I find a way to meet the competitive advantage that they have, or I find some other way to compete, right, against that particular person. So in this case, what we might say is, suppose I am a competitor and the only radio station in town is owned by someone whose political views are antithetical to mine, and I know that I'm not going to get any radio time from that person, or I ask and I get rejected, and meanwhile I know, or I can already hear, that my political competitor is getting lots and lots of radio time. Rather than whining to the FCC about how unfair it is, what I should do is say, all right, I need to focus my competitive strategy in some other way. So this guy is spending thousands of dollars on radio time. Maybe what I should do with my thousands of dollars is hire someone who's a really awesome graphics designer so that my posters look a whole lot better than his posters, right? Or if he is strong on radio, maybe what I need to do is offer more political rallies, right? Or do a parade, right? Or make more pamphlets and spend more time doing door-to-door, and so forth. The idea here is that a self-responsible competitor will not expect that every dimension of competition, every asset that's brought to the table has to be absolutely equalized, and that an external party has to make it so, but rather we all bring to the table strengths and weaknesses. We should, in an informed way, know what our strengths and weaknesses are, know what our competitors' strengths and weaknesses are, play up our strengths, compensate for our weaknesses, be innovative, be creative. There's always a way to rise to a competitive challenge, and that's how we handle things as self-responsible people in a free country. Now, the only cell then that is left to be talked about here from this perspective is the proper role of government. And this side will argue that the proper role of government is to protect people's rights. All individuals have certain broad rights. And the important rights in this case here are liberty rights. People should be free to compete or not compete, right, as they so choose, whether in radio business, whether running for office, right, or not, advertisers competing amongst each other, and people's property rights. If someone has a legitimate piece of property, right, that they have acquired, right, or purchased. The government should see it as their property to be used as they judge fit and not be overriding or interfering, right, with that piece of property. So this position then says what we have in the free market is a network of win-win-win transactions. We ask the question, are anyone's rights being violated? Are we making the audience listen to the radio station, right? No, we're not. Are we controlling, right, how they use their particular radio? No. Are we making them think or believe anything with respect to politics or anything else for that matter? No. No one's rights are being violated here. Competitors, are competitors freely able to compete or not? Are we violating their liberty? If they choose to use certain economic resources in the competition, are we interfering with their liberty or their property rights, right, to do so? No. In the case of the broadcasters do have certain amounts of property, right? They own the license, they own the radio station, and so forth. If we had FCC legislation, it seems like we would be overriding their right to use their property as they so see fit. And so this position will say, not only is there no need for the FCC to enact a fairness doctrine, right? The free market is going to work it out, but also it's not a proper role of government to use its power in that way. And so what we then say is the FCC, the fairness doctrine is both, let me put it this way, unnecessary, right, and immoral. Strong language. Here is if the government is using its power to violate people's rights, that makes it immoral, and that's backed up by a judging of practical lack of necessity.